Horror hounds, welcome to my horror house. Today I want to talk about something a little bit different, not a film or films, but some promotional and supplementary material, probably some of the best that there has ever been, that surrounded the Blair Witch Project and Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2. Documentaries that were essentially made to promote both films, but made with such an eye for detail and a love for the lore that I would actually suggest that these three documentaries, whilst they're essentially covert promos, they're essentially extras on a DVD, supplemental material, I would suggest that they're of such high quality that if you're at all interested in the Blair Witch Project and its surrounding mythology, the content of these documentaries is the best content about the Blair Witch that you can possibly get. They do nothing but bolster up and improve the Blair Witch Project and even Book of Shadows, the much maligned Blair Witch 2. The first of them is Curse of the Blair Witch, which came out on the Sci-Fi Channel just ahead of the theatrical release of the Blair Witch Project. And at that time it was being promoted and advertised as a true story. The sort of myth and the rumour mill that built up around it, that the footage was somehow real, meant that what they did with this sort of promo documentary, this 45-minute documentary, is they made it and put it out completely straight, as if it was a documentary, as if these kids had gone missing. We talk with relatives and friends of the three missing students, and then dig back deeper into the myth of the Blair Witch in Burkittsville and some of the strange incidents and murders and disappearances that have occurred there over the centuries, all the way back to Ellie Kedward, the woman supposedly identified as being the Blair Witch. And it's all done in a sort of unsolved mysteries fashion. There's archival footage that looks superb. They find a shipping cargo manifest which shows an Elle Kedward travelling from Britain over to the New World. They have little segments of a sort of late 1970s occult TV programs, sort of in the vein of sort of Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, and that all looks excellent and of a piece. You've got wonderful talking heads disagreeing, giving slightly different versions of historical events in Blair and slightly different takes on what that means. You've even got the skeptic there who's there to cast doubt on the events of the movie that you're about to see, and all of it just sort of compounds this notion of this sort of verisimilitude, this idea that it's documentary rather than just a fictionalized horror movie. All of the items and sort of notes of interest about the mythology and history of the town are present in the film, but they're bolstered so much by this documentary Curse of the Blair Witch that I would suggest that the absolute best way to watch the Blair Witch Project is to watch Curse of the Blair Witch first and then the movie itself, and you'll just find little grace notes in the movie that have been picked out and highlighted and sort of brought more to the fore by Curse of the Blair Witch, that has had so much effort and love and care and craft put into it that I actually prefer it to the Blair Witch Project, or certainly would view the two now as definitely in conjunction. I would never watch the Blair Witch Project without also watching Curse of the Blair Witch. One of the segments in Curse of the Blair Witch which I found the most compelling was sort of some verite footage purportedly from the 1940s of Rustin Parr, who has a rich sort of dark seam in Blair Witch mythology. The guy who lived out in the woods, who abducted 8 children, killed 7 of them, and 1 was a survivor. That aspect of the mythology is explored in and of itself in another 45 minute sort of fake documentary called The Massacre of the Burkittsville 7, The Blair Witch Legacy. And it digs fascinatingly into just that one tiny aspect. Again, it's presented as sort of an unsolved mysteries kind of documentary, but it puts spin on what you are told in the movie and also what you were told in Curse of the Blair Witch. A very obsessed guy who is looking into this case and has come up with a unique theory that he's hoping to try and fit with the facts, that it was in fact not Rustin Parr who committed the murders, but the one child who miraculously survived. This theory goes that he was actually the murderer, the child was, or at least the puppet master or the mastermind behind it, who somehow managed to convince Rustin Parr to go along with him and do it and also take the blame. It's absolutely fascinating, but again, there's lots of contradictory takes on the material, and not everyone in the documentary agrees. And what I find absolutely fascinating about this particular sort of fake documentary is how hard it goes against the accepted facts in the main freaking movie and undermines it and undercuts it, and all of this kind of details not quite marrying up and people's recollections or the way they recount the story not quite aligning perfectly just continually gives everything the flavour of it being real. This was absolutely the greatest sort of marketing coup ever pulled off. It might seem weird now, but at the time, with this documentary presented very po-faced on the Sci-Fi Channel, and the website that you could go to presented absolutely straight, just presenting the evidence as was of these missing students, there were plenty of people who thought that the footage of the Blair Witch Project was true. You could not possibly think that of Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2, which I think gets a really bad rap. It's essentially not the Blair Witch Project again. And for all it's trying to do something different, and the director actually getting screwed over by losing Final Cut, losing an awful lot of control over it, weirdly, some of what they were attempting to do with Book of Shadows, I think, is vindicated and clawed back in the companion documentary for Blair Witch 2, which is called Shadow of the Blair Witch. And again, it's a 45 minute documentary. And in this documentary, which is a little bit more like a true crime than an unsolved mysteries, the tone of this one, treats Book of Shadows as the Hollywood movie version of a series of murders that actually happened in the Black Hills in the wake of the release of the Blair Witch Project, the movie. And this sort of like true crime documentary tells the story of the real life murders. There are even people in the Blair Witch 2 documentary who think that the original film is a hoax, but that people became obsessed with the hoax and thought it was real, and as a consequence these real life murders happened, which are fictionalized in Book of Shadows. The commitment to the bit across all three of these documentaries is absolutely fantastic. It really tickles me that there is a local sort of Burkittsville historian who appears in all three of them, and if you watch all three of them, you can piece together the particular axe he has to grind against the Maryland Historical Society and his own agenda. The absolute glee with which these documentaries sometimes act to undermine or subvert the content of the movies that they are ostensibly there to drum up interest for and advertise is absolutely fascinating. It is at times really creepy. If you watch them alone at night, these documentaries give me more shivers than the movies do, the Blair Witch Project or Book of Shadows. Absolutely fascinating artifacts of their time. An advertising campaign that was like nothing else that had come before it, and that we will probably see nothing else like it again. And what we have here aren't just extended promos, they're little works of art themselves. They're explorations, sort of archaeology, digging into this rich mythology that sort of only gets vaguely brushed on in the first movie, gets talked about in sort of Hollywood movie version meta terms in Book of Shadows, which is correct for the tone and the content of that movie, and it's treated with such sort of respect in these three documentaries that you can't help but get the chills, and you can't help but think that the people that made these went so above and beyond what anyone else does to try and get you to go and watch a movie, that they become little works of art in themselves, as vital as the main pieces. The only other sort of supplementary content that I can think of that is on a par of these is involved in the Twin Peaks universe and the Twin Peaks supplemental material, which is in on of itself fascinating and contradictory, adds texture and depth, and I can't think of anywhere else that this has happened. If you haven't seen these documentaries, or I've only seen one of them, I urge you to seek them all out. I believe they're here on YouTube, so if I can, I will link to them all in the descriptions below.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.